back to FANSPLAINED, a media criticism podcast with Ryan and M. I'm Ryan.
And I'm M.
And I'm on the wrong script. Hold on. There we go. And in this episode, we're finishing up our MCU hiatus with the Marvel film Multiverse. This time, we're digging into The Gifted. It's one of two major X-Men related television releases in the late 2010s and doesn't quite fit into any timeline. That's about as good as I can sum that up on the fly.
Pretty much. We figured if it's a part of any timeline at all, it's probably after X3 during the bad timeline or whatever.
Mostly because of, how certain people aren't present and the other characters, it does kind of resurface.
Yeah.
But it's a mess.
Yeah.
So, production-wise, we're doing both seasons. We planned to do these originally separately, but it was like pulling teeth to get through the first season.
It was.
Ryan, me, hi, hello. I am the only one of us two who's seen the second season, but it's more the same thing, so...
It was really hard for me to even try to get through the first season. I really wanted to like it. I thought I would at least thought it was okay, but no, I quickly found out I don't like this at all.
Yeah, it was great when I was watching it the first time, mostly because I think it kind of had that very, WandaVision-y thing for some people where they're really just watching it to see if they can, see what happens and see what's going to be revealed and see what else they'll pull into the show or whatever. Yeah. But then they don't do a lot of those things, and then you watch it in retrospect and you're like, it really didn't have a whole lot to it, did it?
Nope.
It's kind of like that.
I think it also helped that you probably were watching it from week to week.
I was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or at least mostly. Sometimes I'd skip a week and then go and watch a couple of them at a time, but...
Yeah, see, us trying to binge it, episode after episode, really, to me, just showed how lackluster the plot really was and how much they were stretching it thin for every episode.
Mm-hmm. So, the first season was released in October of 2017, the second season in September of 2018, and then it was formally canceled in April of 2019, which was about the time that everything kind of just... We're done.
Pretty much.
Because of the merger and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason that New Mutants took forever to come out is because it had delays on delays on delays on delays, and then 2020 happened.
Yeah.
So they couldn't release it early 2020 like they wanted to. So it was produced by 20th Century Fox Television and Marvel Television. You can tell because it's one of the few Fox things left before the merger fully happened.
You have the before the merger and you have the after the merger times.
Or really mid-merger times, because the mid-merger really...
Mid-merger really fucked quite a few projects.
Yeah, it absolutely did. So, the first season, the one we actually binged, was 13 episodes long. The second season is 16 episodes, and this is part of the problem.
There was no way I was going to get through 16 episodes when I could barely get through the 13.
Well, and that's part of the problem, is that if there is enough plot there to make a mini-series, fine. I could have watched this if it had been as long as, Agent Carter and not as long as Daredevil. Mm-hmm. This runtime was way too long for the content that they had planned for it. And so you're repeating a lot of beats. The plot itself is repeating a ton of beats from X-Men stuff we've seen before.
Yes.
You might put new faces on those things you're doing, but for the most part, we've seen the whole Charles and Eric dichotomy before. So, okay, you put women's faces on it, and one of them isn't a mutant. It's still the same... But we want to get along. No, we don't. I want to burn everything to the ground. It's the same thing.
It's literally the same.
It's literally the same thing. It's a mess. It's a mess, but, if it had been much shorter, it might have been salvageable.
It might have been more tolerable. But
it's just way too long. If you had condensed both seasons into that 13 episodes...
Fine.
I might understand it.
That probably would have actually been better, because... My biggest problem with this show is the pacing.
It's way too long.
The second part is the story, because you have, if your fucking TV show does not pick up speed and actually catch even a modicum of interest from me until I'm over halfway through it.
A modicum?
Yes, that's what I said.
Modicum, you mean?
Whatever. I don't care, because this show sucks.
Yeah, if the pilot is the best thing about the show, you have a problem.
I didn't even like the pilot. I liked it when we got to see Bill's dad. That's not even his name.
Reed's dad.
Reed's dad, whatever.
Bill!
It's okay. It's okay.
That would have been a better thing to watch, actually.
That's all I could think about.
Well, and, I mean, there's a thing to say about this, because, like, one, this took place of a failed, like, 2016 Hellfire Club TV project that didn't get off the ground. But then also, watching this after we did Dark Phoenix, all I can see in this is all of the stuff they wanted to put in Dark Phoenix but couldn't, so they shoved in this TV show, and it isn't good, because it isn't the thing that they actually planned on doing with any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, if you'd actually had a real Hellfire Club in this, would have been amazing, but you don't. The only good thing about the second season are the Morlocks, and even then, you still did them kind of dirty. Really dirty. There's so much meandering.
There's way too much meandering.
They just sit in the mutant underground building for like half the show, and it's like there's no urgency to any of this. This is way too long.
There's no urgency.
If we're just sitting here, like, I get quiet moments, but like half the show is quiet moments. They're not effective at that point anymore.
Like, you have a show like Daredevil, which again I'm probably gonna end up referencing a lot more often now that you have actually seen it. Mm-hmm. Is that you have you saw how the first season had a lot of plot. There was actually a lot of urgency. There was a lot of tension. There's a lot of intensity. But then you had those moments where it got quiet. Mm-hmm. It slowed down, and you could like take a breath.
Yeah. I mean, X-Men comics are famous for doing that.
Yeah.
Well, the Claremont run of X-Men comics are famous for doing that. Anyway.
Daredevil knew how to do that and still pick up the pace. This show
absolutely does not ever.
No, not ever.
Not ever. Like, even when you have, like, the big moments where, like, we're rescuing Lorna from the neo-Nazis that we're not calling neo-Nazis, except she definitely calls them Nazis, so it's not even a clever metaphor. Even in that, it's kind of like, they spend half an episode on it, fine, and then it's done.
It's done.
Like, you have, like, little moments of, oh, this is a scary thing that we need to take care of right now, and then it's right back to just, like, we're kind of living in mutant suburbia or whatever up until, like, somebody figures out where they are magically. Whatever. We're still on production, and I'm getting, like, really into the writing, so I should probably just move into that first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're done with production, really.
Yeah, I mean, like, there are various writers and directors on the show. There were numerous women and POC on the writing board, too, because I had to go look this up, because one of my biggest contentions with the writing and the Gifted is not how diverse on the surface it is, because on the surface, if it was actually as diverse as it looks, I'd love it.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
It's all over the place. It's great. The casting is phenomenal in that regard.
I didn't mind the actors. The actors are doing the best that they can with what they have.
But for a show that is this diverse,
yes,
it has no business relying on as many awful stereotypes as it does, and they are all over the place.
They are.
You have the one Latin main character shoved into the Mexican cartel.
Again.
Great.
Haven't we already seen this? Didn't they do that?
Star Wars!
Yeah, didn't they do that in Rise of Skywalker, where they suddenly made Poe a drug runner in his past?
Why?
Because, of course, you know...
Except that this one's more obvious because it's the literal cartel.
I mean, and then everyone starts judging him about it when it's like, okay, but Finn, you were a stormtrooper, and Rey, yeah, you were a scavenger on a planet full of very shady-ass people. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, we're all going to stop the movie. We're all just going
to point at Poe.
We're going to stop the movie and point at him and go, oh, you are a space runner.
I mean, they kind of do that with Marcos here, too.
They do!
And it's really irritating because it's like,
they do,
Lorna, you are a terrorist.
Yeah, Lorna, you are a terrorist.
I agree with some of your points. As usual, I agreed with your dad, too. But you're still a terrorist.
Blink, you've done some fucked up shit. Everybody in that
compound... You're all thieves at minimum.
Yeah, everybody in that compound has broken at least one law.
At minimum.
But no, we are going to turn on Marcos and, you know, condemn him and judge him and just rake him over the coals for this. And it's like, it's literally the same thing they did to Bo. Yeah, I just don't understand. Well, why?
And even then, like, you also have Claire, who is, you know, the one Asian girl with the cool colored streaks in her hair. And then
she's also very, and somehow they make her very, you know, in distress immediately, but also very standoffish.
And because of all the makeup with her eyes, they also give her, like, these big anime eyes.
She's in distress, but they also make her super standoffish and cold.
Ugh, like they give her like so many like anime personality stereotypes.
They turn her into a tsundere like immediately.
It's so irritating, and there's no reason for it.
No.
Then you also have like Lorna in the women's prison, and that women's prison alone. Like, I get that you're like, we put this in Georgia so we can just do all these bad. Everyone in the South is a racist stuff, which also is awful. But at the same time, like, why is, like, 90% of the people beating the crap out of a pregnant Lorna in prison a black woman? Why? I don't understand this. You're leaning right into all those stereotypes, too, and it's like, I sat through enough of the Orange is the New Black that I don't need to put up with more of this. No. No more of that. And you also have, like, it just keeps going.
Yeah.
Like, you have Caitlyn showing up to Jace's home when they're trying to confront them over, like, please listen to us reasonably about our children so we can appeal to you about your dead child or whatever. Which, on the surface, not a terrible thing, except that you have this white family going into a black family's home
with a
fucking gun just sitting there in plain sight, and the white family's just like,
I mean,
like,
to be fair,
that's probably actually pretty accurate, to be fair, but...
to be fair, though, he did technically shove his way into Caitlyn's home first.
Wrong show.
With a gun.
He did, and she brings that up, but at the same time, I'm just like, this is a visual that
this is a visual.
way different now than when I watched it. I mean, it was still wildly uncomfortable when I watched it the first time.
It's very uncomfortable to watch.
This didn't age well at all post-2020.
It's very uncomfortable when you watch it, but it's also incredibly uncomfortable how right before that scene, she's like, my father put a gun in my hands when I was like 4 years old or whatever, and I'm like, that doesn't make this better.
Great. Love that.
That makes this worse, actually.
Yeah, I don't know how you have such a diverse writing team and you still end up with all of these stereotypes that feel like this was written by a bunch of out-of-touch white people.
Or really bad fanfic writers.
I mean,
who decided to make their own mutant OCs and have them attached to the X-Men trilogy that ended.
That is largely what happened, yes.
That is what this feels... I just figured it out. That's why I don't like it.
Yep.
It's
You're
shitty.
Welcome.
It's shitty X-Men fanfiction with people's shitty X-Men OCs.
Yep. You're welcome.
Oh
I mean, to be fair, there were probably a lot of studio hands in this, and they can only do so much around that. I understand that. But there are still a lot of things in this show that make me side-eye the hell out of the writing.
There's so much about the writing I hate.
I mean, that alone. And then you have, like... the X-Men have always been, and we've covered this before when we've covered the X-Men in previous episodes, the newer trilogy, the older ones. Mm-hmm. It's always been a metaphor for, like, disability advocacy, or minority advocacy, or whatever. Like, the X-Men they're kind of there to be just we're a metaphor for the downtrodden and the way that society treats them.
We are a metaphor for people that do not fit inside the norm box that everyone wants to fit in. It's never
meant to be, like, a super hyper-specific thing.
No.
And when you start trying to make it super hyper-specific, it gets kind of cringy because you're pushing it a little hard. Like, the people who try and insist about
it was incredibly...
the MLK versus Malcolm X.
It was incredibly heavy-handed in this show.
Yeah, it is.
Like, to the point to where we had to keep pausing
it felt
and
like
I rolling my
parody.
eyes. Like,
it felt like parody because it was so obvious, because they just hit you over the head with it. And it wasn't even just like, it was intentional that they wanted these things to mirror real life, and it's like, no. That was your first big misstep, is you're making it too real.
Yes.
And you're making it too preachy on real life issues, when, like, these things can be metaphors and still talk about that without having to resort to, we had a mutant 9/11.
Like, there's so many...
We made the Sentinel Services the new SS.
There's so many sci-fi and fantasy stories that have managed to do exactly that without coming off the way this show did.
Yeah. Like, you look at that, like, the way that they depict Sentinel Services, the, quote, SS.
Yeah.
And compare that to the way the First Class handled it when Charles says they're just men following orders.
Oh.
They don't have to specifically tell you out and out that Charles sounds like a fucking Nazi. But he does.
No, he sounds like a Nazi sympathizer.
Well, you get what I mean. Like, he sounds like one of them.
And that's what triggers
And that
Eric
is the
hardcore.
point. But they don't have to be like, they don't have to hit you over the head at that moment with, wow, he sounds kind of like a Nazi/sympathizer.
And then you get the twins to experiment on them, which was something that happened in the Holocaust. Twins specifically were taken by the angel
well, and
of
I
death.
have major questions about this, because the characters that they picked for this, Fenris, were also supposed to show up in Dark Phoenix. We talked about that a little bit, and they obviously didn't. But comics-wise, the original ones, the great-grandparents in this show, not the current twins, the great-grandparents in this show, were Nazis. They were, like, part of Hydra. So you have that, but then they're experimenting on, like, the metaphors are also, like, they're really obvious, but they're a mess. They're confused. They don't make any sense.
I think it's definitely because they were trying to take tips from First Class and how, certain characters were used as bait for others, and you're like, I'm gonna shoot them.
They try so hard to hit the melodrama, and it's just,
and then they squeeze in the actual Holocaust history of twins being experimented on by actual Nazis. Like, I don't know if he was called the Angel of Death or the Angel of Auschwitz or some shit, but it was really fucked up. He specifically sought out twins, and and then you go through all of, like, the cages and the cells and all these other mutants that are experimented on, and then they're tagged together.
Yeah.
And their blood is mingled and all this shit.
It's really, like, there's not an...
It goes almost too hard to the point of absurdity.
Yeah, it does. That's what I kept saying when we were watching it. It almost feels like a parody, because of just how ridiculously over the top it is. It's way too much. And it's not a metaphor anymore, it's just text. There is no subtext in this show, that's the problem. It's all just text.
Like, they really thought that they were doing something, and it's like, no.
It's like babies first trying to make a statement with your art.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like, when you're a kid and you write, like, those really cringy things that you definitely feel is, like, from the heart, and you're saying such a thing, but then you revisit it years later and you're like, oh my god.
I never want anyone to see this.
I never want anyone to see this ever. That's what this whole show feels like.
That's what I mean. It's someone's bad X-Men fan fiction.
Well, and then you have, like, the Mutant Underground, which is supposed to be an allusion to the Underground Railroad. I'm like, again, not remotely fucking subtle.
And the X-Men chose us. The X-Men aren't around anymore.
No,
what
we just have to...
What does that even mean?
Something to do with Mutant 9/11.
This is why I thought it ended up being after X3, because the X-Men are essentially gone.
Well, I do actually have a point about that, is that the showrunner, who is Matt Nix, his other work includes Burn Notice, which is why we see a bunch of actors from Burn Notice in this show. Yes. Good Guys. He also did the Disney Turner and Hooch in 2021. Anyway, so he claims that this was its own completely separate timeline. Well, okay. But he only did this after Stephen Moyer, who is Reed/Beale. Beale. He will always just be Bill to me.
He will.
Straight up.
I'm sorry.
This isn't even a True Blood podcast, but he will always be Bill.
I mean, we'll probably cover it at some point, maybe.
But he said that this was meant to fit between Legion and Logan. And then that's when Nix went and backtracked it and was like, no, it's its own thing. It's its own thing.
Okay.
But originally they were trying to make Legion... They were basically what they were trying to do is stick all of the newer stuff together because they wanted all the newer stuff to sit together. But there's no way that works when Logan is off in its own weirdo timeline.
Yeah, Logan is off in its own weirdo, depressed timeline. Super dark, depressive, violent timeline. Like,
yeah,
we
and
can't...
I might buy this one as a precursor to that if Charles hadn't just, like, obliterated all the mutants and not just the X-Men.
Also,
if it had just been the X-Men, I might understand, but that's not what it was.
I would be more willing to believe that Legion is a precursor to Logan.
It might be. Legion is the one I can't figure out, but like I like it as its own little pocket universe thing.
We will have time to figure it out when we cover it.
But yeah, this is way too connected to real world events to the point where it's not escapism. It's not even really making a point. You might as well just be like pulling half of your dialogue from like The Daily Show with Jon Stewart or something, because it's just.
I miss Jon Stewart though.
I know, but like you might as well just be pulling your actual dialogue from the headlines. Like, this isn't Law and Order where like they literally tell you that's what they're doing, and the show is meant to be that. This is supposed to be a fantasy thing, and I get that like there's the write what you know and like connect it back to real world things enough that people can connect with it, but it gets to the point where you're using so much of this that you're trying to create such a dystopia that it's just, did you read 1984 once and decided that you were just going to make X-Men 1984 or something? Like, it feels very much like baby's first dystopia. I cannot handle it.
I'm going to rewrite Harry Potter with my OC being the actual star.
Well, what they actually also said that they got inspiration from Heroes, which we can see all over in this because I kept saying that Lauren looked like
she looks like
Claire.
Yeah, she looks like Claire. I said she looked like Claire.
No, she does. And she even has like a very similar Claire story, except that she doesn't get half of the development.
And then by like episode 3, I was like, I would rather be watching season 1 of Heroes again.
I mean, absolutely, I would. But at the same time, again, this also feels kind of like Heroes fanfic at that point. Because that one was also wildly diverse, but there was a reason for that, and I bought into it more. This one's just, it's all surface level everything, and that's the problem. The diversity is surface level. Commentary is surface level. The plot is surface level. Everything is just there.
Now I'm just sad about how Heroes wasn't as good as season 1 now.
I mean, it happens.
I missed that show too.
Yeah, they also said that they got inspiration from this like spin-off comic called District X, which is supposed to be like this specific district in which like mutants live, kind of like Magneto's special little island, except it's in a city. So they don't want to use the word, and I'm not going to use the word, but we all know what word I'm thinking of.
Begins with a G.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really what... It's the kind of vibe I get. I haven't looked at the comic, but the way they were explaining that's kind of how I understood it.
I mean, you can just... Because the word ghetto actually did come from medieval Europe when they were sequestering the Jews into their cities.
Well, and I mean, that's largely still what's happening.
You can call it that in reference to that. It's a sequestered city. You don't have to...
I know, I just don't...
It's not the other
like
one.
Using it. But in general, like... They noted, well, it's about seeing mutants in society dealing with crime and drugs and their relationships to each other. And I'm like, okay, well, you've got the crime and the drugs. I'm not really seeing a whole lot of the relationships to each other because, again, you're just kind of smushing people at each other and expecting me to buy it because you tell me it's a thing.
Yeah,
or you made it a plot point and not an organic development.
You're expecting me to buy into these relationships without giving them any development or even giving me any real reason to like the characters. I mean, I kind of liked some of the characters by the end of the show, but a majority of the relationships, I didn't give a fuck about any of them.
Well, and it's because half of those relationships, only one person in that relationship gives a fuck about it.
Yeah. That's
Marcos
really...
cares a hell of a lot more about that relationship than Lorna does.
I know.
He cares a hell of a lot more about that baby than Lorna does.
And that's what made me so aggravated. I wanted to like Lorna. Like, I could definitely see where she takes after her father. Multiple times throughout the show.
Like, I was even down for, like, the whole BPD thing, or the bipolar, not borderline, bipolar.
Yeah.
Because they were playing that up, and you can see that, but the script really doesn't always lean into how much the actress is trying to put into that.
Yeah, like, they even come up, or they even talk about it at one point where, you know, everyone's like, you know, is this like possibly a manic episode for you? Do you think, like, they're trying to talk her through it and make her think things through, and I appreciated that, but it still feels like it is way too little too late.
Yeah.
And
but again, it's more of them just telling you about a thing and making a statement on this mental health issue than it is them actually exploring this character's development with any kind of actual mental issue. That's the problem.
I also genuinely hated how, yes, Marcos was way more invested in this relationship. I hated how, for Lorna, it's like there are moments where she seems to care about him, but then other times he's just like an afterthought, or she's just like, yeah, whatever, you're a guy I like to fuck, blah, blah, blah. And then
she'll get mad at him for going off trying to save her life. How dare you?
Or she will use the baby to manipulate the situation, which I really hated that.
Yeah, well, especially once you get to season 2, when like half of the season writes the baby out of existence because they didn't know what to do with it.
Which, you told me that before we even started this, and then I'm like, okay, they are making this, they're talking up this fucking baby in almost every episode. They do
nothing with the baby ever.
Then why even have it as this thing?
So that Lorna can whip it around like a weapon.
Also, they don't even address the fact that in women who have bipolar disorder, it can, getting pregnant and their hormones doing what they do when they're pregnant can actually, make them go through worse periods of moods.
This would require the show to remember consistently that Lorna was pregnant. It did not do that in season 1.
I mean, I think
because like she would have moments where like she didn't even remember she had, you know, that she was pregnant at all, and then you'd go like 5 minutes and then they'd be like, oh my god, this baby is the most important thing that's happening to the plot. And it's like, is it though?
Like, they talk about how her powers get stronger, but I'm like, okay, but maybe it would have been interesting for you to explore what it was doing to the rest of her, since you wanted to throw it out every once in a while.
They still don't even bring that up until toward the end of the season, though, because they don't bring that up until the Frost sisters show up.
Yeah,
and that is the tail end of the season. So it's like, again, it takes another character to constantly remind Lorna that she's pregnant, Because the show will not show us this.
She was constantly...
They have to tell us over and over and over again, remember, she's pregnant.
She was constantly fucking herself up in prison by trying to go against her collar and making her nose bleed and shit. I'm like, okay, but isn't that fucking up your kid?
Who knows? And then she'll get mad at people for using the pregnancy against her, and it's like, girl, you barely even remember it's a thing.
And then you use it to manipulate, your boyfriend. Anyway, it's just, it's infuriating. It's the inconsistencies, it's the bad pace, it's the bad writing, bad characterization, lazy stereotypes, lazy this, lazy that. It's...
Everything is extremely lazy. That's the problem with it.
That is the problem.
So, summary-wise, I pulled a lot of this from Wikipedia because it is actually pretty cut and dry. So you have a seemingly ordinary family, and they're thrown a curveball when they discover that their 2 kids are both mutants. Gasp.
And Andy is an annoying little prick. For the record, Your Honor. I don't like him.
Yeah, well, that's fair. In a world more scared of the mutant threat than ever, this throws the Strucker family immediately into the world of running and living as refugee rebels, which, again, could be interesting if there was any kind of urgency to living like refugees, but it really just feels like they're all at a sleepaway camp. Everyone still has perfect hair and perfect makeup and perfect manicures.
Everyone has really nice looking hair for, being in a place like that.
Lauren still has a really nice French manicure for not having any access to the family's money or nail salons.
Also, they all managed to find clothes that fit them pretty snugly despite not having any belongings.
Magic.
Sure.
Magic.
Or maybe because the plot demands it.
Yeah, pretty much. This becomes complicated, however, when Andy and Lauren's father, Reed, has a reputation that precedes him, one of working as a prosecutor against mutants.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. The family meets up with the unwitting successors of the missing X-Men, which we kind of covered. The mutant underground, led by a metal-bending mutant named Lorna and her partner Marcos, as well as their friend John Proudstar. There's another stereotype that I could have lived without, making that one dude the tracker. And I know that those were probably his powers ahead of time, but
yeah,
I see you relying on that a little too much. I'm like, could you not give him any other powers?
That's more
really?
of a... Yeah, I mean, that's probably accurate to who he is in the comics or whatever, but I feel like whoever created his character could have done a little better
Give
than
him
that.
something a little bit more than that.
Even the Native American character in that Mortal Kombat cartoon, had a wolf jump out of his chest or something. Come on.
Give me something cool. I don't know. Anyway, the division between the humans and mutants is not even the only concern. You also have the factions that begin to form within the mutant underground as well. There you go. That's the summary.
That's the summary.
And then even when you get into
show.
season 2, it's basically all about the factions that formed in the mutant underground because we recreated the Brotherhood versus the X-Men. That's what we did. There you go. That's season 2.
And we needed 13 episodes surrounding this ultra white, boring middle... No, not...
They're not even
they're not
middle
even middle class.
They're upper class.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Which makes them even more irritating because on one hand, sure, you could use their lack of perspective to an advantage and give them an actual arc. They kind of try to do that
a little bit here and there.
But the thing that bothers me the most is that
it only works for some of them and not all of them because Caitlin never really develops.
It's not even...
She'll, immediately regress. No, Andy literally never develops.
No, all of these characters will continue to just Pikachu face over shit they should already know by that point.
Yeah, it's I don't really have a lot of sympathy for you. Even though, I know that you're kind of sheltered and entitled about stuff, I get that, but, catch up with the rest of the class, please. Do your homework. Catch up.
No, we're just gonna play Monopoly.
Oh, Dad's always the shoe!
Shut up, Lauren.
So...
Or whoever your fucking name is, I don't care.
It's Lauren, you got it right.
Okay, good.
So, primary cast, you have Stephen Moyer, who is Reed. Bill.
Beale.
But he's Reed. You have Amy Acker, who's Caitlin, and I was extremely glad to at least see her in something that was not made by Joss Whedon. You have Natalie Allen Lind, who was Lauren. Percy Hines White, who was Andy. I don't know what it is with a lot of the actors in this show and using their full middle names and everything, but here you go.
That's weird.
You had Chantil as Marcos, and he's basically...
Discount Oscar Isaac.
TV Oscar Isaac.
He is. Mm-hmm. No, not TV, because now he's doing TV shows.
Disney Plus does not count as, like...
Yes, it does!
Aired on not even cable TV.
He is Discount Oscar Isaac because he looks like you could actually be a sibling.
I want them to be in a thing together,
they do.
Because, like... Sean was one of the VIPs in this show, let me tell you. Marcos was one of the likable people in this entire show. I
actually liked his character.
Regardless of the racial stereotypes they throw at him.
Yeah, I actually liked his character. His actor was doing the best he fucking could. Props to him for that. Because, my God, did they really just hand him a turd sandwich through a lot of this show.
Yeah. You had Emma Dumont as Lorna. Again, the actress is trying very hard. I don't think that the writing is really supporting that.
No, the writing failed a lot of these actors. A lot of these actors did the best that they could with the exception of Andy, and I'm just saying that mostly because I don't like his character. You just don't like the character. I don't like his character.
And that's fair.
I'm sorry, Percy. It's nothing personal. I just really hated your character.
I mean, it's kind of like how everyone thought that Joffrey's actor was extremely punchable when he's, like, nothing like that IRL, right?
No, Jack Leeson is a sweetheart. But my God, did he play a little fucking bastard.
Yeah, he was extremely singularly unlikable.
Awful.
You also had Kobe Bell as Jace Turner. I feel, honestly, the same about, like, the actor himself is fine. The acting itself is fine. God, I hated Jace.
I hated him. They tried so hard to make him sympathetic, and I felt nothing.
I'm sorry. Like, you tried to punish him, and I felt nothing about it.
They showed his tragic daughter backstory. I felt nothing when that kid died. I felt nothing.
I know, which is awful to say, but I didn't either. Like, the one VIP in that moment was the woman who plays his wife.
Yes.
Because she has to sell that twice. And it was actually gut-wrenching on her end. Like, I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. But, like, the little girl really didn't make me feel a whole lot. And Jace just constantly being all, like, stoic, my daughter died. I don't feel anything about it at all.
I need to say this about that scene with that little girl in the merry-go-round. Was actually hilarious, really, in retrospect, because
it's not at all supposed to be funny.
Because they're telling her they need to go. She's like, I'm getting my doll. I'm gonna sit here and smile.
I mean, I need to get my stuffed animal off of the spinny thing.
I'm just gonna sit on this merry-go-round and smile and play with my dolls as this massive light comes towards me.
Like, just wild. It was not done with any kind of subtlety, and it just becomes a joke.
I felt nothing, and now I'm laughing my ass off because it was filmed so poorly. Yeah,
you had Jamie Chung as Clarice. I said Claire earlier. I meant Clarice. We've been watching too much Daredevil.
We have
been. Anyway, so Clarice, not Claire. I'm fixing this for myself. Clarice.
Hello, Clarice.
A different actress from Days of Future Past.
Yes.
Again, acting is fine. Not really sure what in the hell they were doing with that character half the time because, like, she'd do a thing and then she'd go back and regress back and then they'd have to go through it all over again and then she'd do it again and they'd have to go. Like, it's perpetual Tony Stark cycle of, like, same development over and over again.
Yeah, like, they literally, in the first season alone, they retreaded more than once that the same plotline they already did in a different episode.
And they'll do it again, because that's how she becomes a Morlock, sort of.
Well, I am even more glad that I vetoed us watching season 2, because I ain't got time for that shit.
I know.
You don't got time for that shit.
No, I do
We have too much stuff to watch.
Yes. You also have Blair Redford as John, who I sincerely like. I actually really like John's character as well. It's just wildly underutilized because they make everything about Lorna's whatever, or the Struckers whatever. When half of the other people are far more interesting than the main characters of the show.
Yes, John was genuinely interesting. I liked
his vet storyline. Loved it, actually.
The Struckers, I didn't give a fuck about. That's what I mean by they're
boring.
They're a boring upper
get, like,
class.
The dad giving the reveal. That was actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting.
But you took
that's why I'm saying
2/3 of the season to get to that.
That's why I'm saying they are boring white upper class family with zero personality, with zero real development, and they're just so
my kids.
They're just so boring. Man.
I know it's really rough.
It would be fine. It would be genuinely interesting if they had better personalities. If you gave me anything at all.
Yeah. Then you have Skylar Samuels as all three of the Frost sisters.
I mean, I liked the glowy eye effect they had.
They're more important in season 2, for better and worse. Like, I don't even actually mind those characters or their writing, but they came in super late.
They did.
That's probably why they're more tolerable.
They came in way too late.
But once you get to the second season, they are a hardcore fixture. And then you have Grace Byers as Reva from season 2, so you didn't see her. Basically, Reva's character is a lot like Reyna from as far through Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as we got.
Yeah.
Except that they make Reva like the primary antagonist of season 2. She's like the head of the Hellfire Club. Or whatever they turn it into. I don't remember if it stays the Hellfire Club or not. I don't remember, but...
Man, they wouldn't have been able to get away with doing an actual Hellfire Club. And
it would have been too sexy.
All the sex and the drugs.
Not on TV, anyway.
And all the raunchy, weird shit
I want a real Hellfire Club. Like, God.
That would be so cool.
Rude. So secondary actors, you have Elena Satine as Sonia. Her last name is Simonson.
Ew.
I feel like this has to be a reference to Walter Simonson.
Who?
He's like a comics writer. He did like a bunch of Thor and stuff.
Oh, I never read a lot of Thor.
Yeah, so. He was like a mainstay in like Marvel comics. That's the only reason where I'm like,
yeah, but if that's
I see what you did.
Yeah, but if that's her actual name.
I don't know. I did not look up if this was actually a character. But again, even if that is her actual name as a character in the comics, I still feel like that is a hardcore nod, regardless. Either way, I see what you did there. You also have Haley Lovett as Sage, who was really just there to be like, I'm the token girl who belongs in a CSI show.
With a pixie cut.
That is just here to look quirky and to give you information, and then I will disappear again. Yeah. She had no character. You had Jeff Daniel Phillips as Fade. Largely feel the same way about him. He was there to be mad at Reed, and that was it. And then you had Jermaine Rivers as Shatter. Again, just there to have really cool makeup and to break a wall once, and that's it.
That's pretty much it.
And then you had Garrett Dallahunt as Dr. Campbell, who was actually pretty effective for what he was. But again, we've seen this mad scientist guy in every Marvel thing ever.
I mean, he was genuinely...
He was generally creepy and unsettling, and I liked it. Yeah.
He really was.
He was actually very effective. I just don't feel like the character itself, it's like, okay, we've seen this like a million times. Great, whatever.
You are no Peter Dinklage, sir.
Yeah, you don't really have a lot of cameos in these shows either, but you did get the one Stan Lee in season 1.
Stan Lee.
When they run into him at the bar.
And here I thought he was walking out of a porn shop originally when I saw
They can't get away with that.
They can't. This isn't Netflix.
Not quite. So, in terms of more production / like the look of the show, it looks like it belonged on the CW.
Yes,
it really did. The pilot itself was filmed in Dallas, and the show was actually meant to be set in Texas. But because Texas took too long to decide on, like, filming industry tax rebates in the middle of them filming, they switched to Georgia and moved everything over to Atlanta and then retooled the show to just be set in Atlanta and just, like, changed some of, like, the references to Texas to Atlanta in the pilot, which is why the pilot looks so different from everything else.
It is very
because
trippy.
It wasn't filmed in Georgia like everything else was.
As someone from Georgia, it's very trippy to actually see that the whole first season just take place in Georgia, because I did recognize a few things.
Well, and I mean, it's funny when we come back to that when, like, we decided that Cuba in First Class was filmed in Georgia.
Yeah, it was filmed on one of the beaches.
Mm-hmm. When it does not look like a U.S. beach at all.
Well, no, I mean, they can make it look a certain way, but
yeah,
also
it's a beach.
But also we did have palm trees and stuff there.
Well, that makes sense then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that also, like I explained in that episode, when it comes to the beaches in Georgia, you can be near the water and you will still sweat like you're nowhere near it.
Right. Ew. Just ew. But I find it funny that they moved everything. I mean, they film everything in Georgia now. That's just what the industry does as a whole. But I just find it funny that they centered the whole setting around that after the fact.
It is actually pretty funny to me. But I mean, yeah, they film in Atlanta because Atlanta's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And you have all the surrounding suburbs, and then you have northern Georgia, which has a lot of land that you can film on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you got all the coastline and shit that you can do too.
Yeah.
It's a very big state, so I'm not
not surprised either. I just found it funny that they centered so much of the show around, this is set in Georgia. Let us reference this every 20 seconds.
Was, like I'm saying, that was trippy to me.
It was hilarious.
But, yeah. It was originally surprising for me when I first started hearing movies were being filmed there, but the more that they do it, the more I'm like, yeah, I can see why, because it's a big-ass state.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of places to film. It's either in Atlanta, Georgia, or northern Georgia, or it's in freaking Canada up there.
Yep. But for as much as they keep referencing, this is Atlanta, we're in Atlanta, so much of the show spends such a long time in that singular interior set.
Yes.
That is not really all that visually interesting. And it feels very much like a sitcom at that rate, or like a soap opera even, because you're just reusing the set over and over and over and over again. And I get why they do it, but at the same time, like, we shouldn't have spent that long in the underground in the first place because there was no urgency to anything story-wise.
Yeah, but you did get to actually see what Georgia pines look like.
Yes.
But
for the most part, they did still spend an absolute absurd amount of time in that one building.
Because they don't look like the ones out there. No. They are tall, huge,
and kind of barren.
They have all their pine needles up top, but they are huge ass trees. They are horrifying because when they fall, they do a lot of damage.
Yeah. I mean, that's really all I have on this. Like, it's pretty token TV, honestly.
The tone, like we said, the tone is all over the place.
It's trying to be horror sometimes, and it's trying to be super serious.
It's like they're trying too hard.
Social commentary sometimes.
Yeah, they try to go so hard to the point to where it becomes absurd. And then other times they're too soft and too CW with it, and it's like...
And then sometimes they want to be super fantasy, and then sometimes they don't.
So, much like the inconsistent writing, the tone and everything else along with it is just as inconsistent, unfortunately.
Yep. Pretty much, that is how this works. So, the composers on the show, you had John Ottman, basically because they would reuse certain old X-Men cues. Yeah. Because we've covered him a bajillion times at this point. You also had David Buckley, who was doing the main, like, the bulk of the other sound of the show.
Yeah.
And his other work, and there was a ton of it. Like, I had to, like, kind of pick out the stuff that I did recognize. He did the Jason Bourne movie. Nice Guys.
Oh.
Ironically, since we covered that when we covered Shane Black.
Yeah, because that was actually a good movie.
Mm-hmm. He also did the music for Angel Has Fallen, which I think is like the third one of all of those Fallen movies or whatever.
Oh my god.
Because they had like Olympus Has Fallen, and that was like the
London
President
Has Fallen.
one, and then you had the UK one, and then you had Angel Has Fallen.
Yeah, London Has Fallen.
And he also did the music for the Batman Arkham Knight video game. He did like a ton of video games also, but that was
we
like,
got that.
one of the main ones. Mm-hmm. I don't remember a whole lot. The only thing I remember about the music was not even the score. It was the times that they'd try and put like songs to like the soft montagey moments, but they were singularly awful.
You want to talk about CW grade?
Like
those songs
B-sides would never see the light of day on Gossip Girl. Bad music. That didn't even fit the tone of the show or the tone of the scene. Like, I'm just like, where did you get this music? Did you get this from, like, the YouTube free library thing? Like, what is happening?
Not referencing the original Gossip Girl in 2022.
You know what? I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry, because the music in that show slaps.
XOXO.
The music in that show slaps. Fight me. It did. It did, and I'm not sorry.
She watched Gossip Girl. I've never watched
I
Gossip
got
Girl.
through part of it, and
I
quit at a certain point.
I spoiled the end for you, because I did look up the ending.
Yeah, you did, and I'm fine with that. But, yeah, so, overall rating out of 5.
1 million years in the dungeon.
So, 0?
I'll give it a 1 for discount Oscar Isaac and the actors that tried really hard.
You know what? I don't have anything else to say. I think that covers it. I'll agree with you. Just straight up.
I mean, most of this has just been us bitching anyway.
There is very little redeemable about this show. Like,
I will be surprised
this
if
is
anyone
so late
makes it
because
through.
we were just really, it was like pulling teeth to get through it. It's like been pulling teeth to even talk about it.
Yeah, because it's just, there's so much, we just didn't like it.
Yeah, like, I remembered it very differently when I first watched it, but I'm like, dang, revisiting this, it did not hold up for me.
No.
Yeah, even a little bit. It actually got cringier, obviously. It's just, it's a rough one to get through.
It is.
Like, to be fair, it is better than Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because we couldn't even make it through a whole season of that.
Like, we've literally just spent this whole episode bitching and talking over each other, so I'll be surprised if anyone actually makes it all the way through it, really.
Bonus for y'all, if you do, leave a comment.
Give yourselves a gold star if you do so.
Gold star, and maybe a brownie. Yeah.
An actual brownie?
An actual brownie.
Okay.
Or, pastry of choice if you cannot have brownies or whatever. A stick of celery or something.
A donut.
The hole in the donut.
A donut hole?
Wrong movie. Anyway, so...
Knives Out!
Thank you for listening to this episode of FANSPLAINED.
Go watch Knives Out instead of The Gifted. How about that?
Or Heroes, even. How about that?
Go watch season 1 of Heroes. Don't look at the other seasons. Then they'll just make you sad.
If you enjoy what we do, consider donating on Coffee. I'm not expecting it after this episode. Anyway, everything we make goes right back into the production quality of the show, which this episode, not very good.
And all the jokes and improvising come for free.
Oh, no.
Yes.
No, I would still like donations, thanks. We appreciate all of our subscribers. I can't even make it through this. We appreciate all of our subscribers and everything you do, especially if you sit through shit like this.
Yes. Especially then.
And we're thankful for anything from Hulk smashing that like button. We have to make jokes out of this because this one was just so bad.
This was a rough one, man.
To your questions and comments on each episode, and especially sharing the show with your friends.
We don't like intentionally shitting on stuff, but when it
sucks, we want to like
sucks.
Things.
We do. We want to like
things.
It.
FANSPLAINED is a weekly media criticism and deep dive podcast, and we are currently still working our way through the chronological order of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Next episode, we'll be back into the MCU proper with the real end of Phase 2 and Ant-Man. We're also doing a reaction to Thor Love and Thunder, but that's not like the scheduled episode, so...
Scott, I need you to put on the
Stop! Stop! Save it for that episode, man.
I do it now.
Save it. Anyway, you can find our updates here on YouTube as well as on Twitter and Coffee at FANSPLAINED if you want more of our conversations on the MCU and other fandoms. So at this point, why? Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for new episode notifications. God bless. Honestly.
Yeah.
I can't believe we made it through it. Fuck.
Until next time, salt shakers. Shaky salt.
Shaky salt.
Cheese. Shaky cheese.
This has been Ryan.
And M.
With the FANSPLAINED podcast. And we will see you next episode.
Hopefully.